Howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So I posted my video on day 11 spoilers for the upcoming 3.17 Siege of the Atlas expansion, set it till go live, and then about 3 minutes later, GGG put out this extra juicy spoiler. Precise Technique is a new keystone that is going to be on the passive tree in 3.17. Keystones always have a big upside and a big downside, and this is no exception. Precise Technique is something that is absolutely terrible in most builds, like most keystones, but there will be a small number of builds where it will truly excel. I'm going to talk about that. I want to talk about what not to use with it, what the alternatives are to it if you're thinking of maybe using it that you should at least consider, and when you would actually go ahead and use Precise Technique. So firstly, Precise Technique grants 40% more attack damage if you can meet a specific condition. Your accuracy rating has to be higher than your maximum life. Now, accuracy rating is a stat that you get about 3 off per level from memory, plus you get some of it based on your dexterity. So you will build up a bit of accuracy rating just by chance, but you will not get as much as you do from maximum life. Maximum life, you get 12 off per level, and you're also going to be deliberately seeking it out on gear on most characters, and you're also going to be doing a number of other things to increase your maximum life. However, you also never deal critical strikes with Precise Technique. Let's talk about firstly the alternative. What if you want to increase your attack damage and you don't want to seriously invest in critical strikes? The alternative is Maligaro's Virtuosity. These gloves are fantastic. They're tremendously underrated, but I will warn you if you're considering using these gloves, they are staggeringly rare. These are what's termed a tier 1 rarity unique. They're the same rarity as Asenath's Gentle Touch, Badge of the Brotherhood, Beric's Respite, a number of other rares like that, Doriani's Prototype. I usually see any given tier 1 rarity unique maybe once every 2 or 3 leagues, so they are genuinely really, really, really rare. But with that disclaimer out of the way, Maligaro's Virtuosity will set your critical strike multiplier to 300%. So this means you need no further investment. You're getting 150% crit multi from these gloves alone, but you cannot benefit from crit multi anywhere else. If you have a critical strike chance of 20%, Maligaro's Virtuosity will provide as much damage as Precise Technique will. If you have a critical strike rating that is more than 20%, if your chance to critical strike is more than 20%, Maligaro's Virtuosity will be better. And so Maligaro's Virtuosity is something that is a really good option if you are trying to build your character to have minimal investment in crits, but still get quite a bit of benefit out of that low investment. So this is the first alternative. You want to do either or. You either want to use Precise Technique or you want to use Maligaro's Virtuosity. You don't use both. And which one of them is better is something that's going to come down to the specific nature of your character. You'll have to work that out based upon your character's other needs. The second alternative is Oskarm. Oskarm is absolutely dominant if you are playing a genuinely accuracy stacking build. So there are builds that will go out of their way a little bit to get, like, say, 4,000 life and 5,000 accuracy. For those builds, you might consider using Precise Technique. But if your build is trying to get 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 accuracy, and then is using various methods to turn that into damage, such as Storm Rider boots, then Oskarm are your gloves. And what Oskarm will do is, if you've got that sort of level of accuracy rating, Oskarm will make sure that you always critically strike with your attacks. Once you're wearing Oskarm, you're definitely going to want to start stacking critical strike multiplier, and you are never going to even consider going anywhere near Precise Technique. The last thing, I've only seen one person make this mistake so far, but I'll mention it as well because I'm sure a lot of people probably are thinking it. Secrets of Suffering and Alternate Ailments are completely turned off by Precise Technique. So Secrets of Suffering says you cannot ignite, chill, freeze, or shock, and you sort of instead get those replaced by Scorched, Brittle, and Sapped. However, Scorched, Brittle, and Sapped from Secrets of Suffering are critical strike exclusive. So you do not want to use Secrets of Suffering, whether it be on an alternating scepter, whether it be from the specific cluster jewel, unique cluster jewel that adds Secrets of Suffering to your tree. You do not want to be using Secrets of Suffering in conjunction with the Precise Technique keystone at all. They don't work together. Last thing that doesn't play well with it is Elemental Overload. So skills that have dealt a critical strike in the last 8 seconds deal 40% more elemental damage with hits and ailments. Elemental Overload seems at first to go really well with Precise Technique because they both reward builds for not being critical strike builds. But when you dig into how Elemental Overload works, you see that actually they do not work together at all. Elemental Overload needs you to just occasionally inflict crits, like maybe one crit every 5 seconds, one crit every 6 seconds or so. Whereas if you are using Precise Technique, you are going to be dealing exactly 0 crits in any 8-second period, and therefore Elemental Overload is not going to work for you. Okay, so that is a whole bunch of things you don't want to use in conjunction with Precise Technique, many of which are quite good. And so you might be thinking, why would I ever use this notable? Well, let's start with Supercharge. Supercharge is probably going to be the best thing to use in conjunction with the Precise Technique Keystone. And that is because Supercharge, now this is a Cluster Jewel exclusive node, makes lightning damage with non-critical strikes lucky. What lucky means is that the damage is rolled twice and only the higher roll applies. This is super good on lightning damage. And the reason for that is that with lightning damage, there's a much larger roll range. Now, in terms of how much damage you actually do with Supercharge, if you want to estimate this, take 2/3 of the maximum roll plus 1/3 of the minimum roll, and that is going to be your average damage with Supercharge. So for instance, if you have a maximum roll of 10,000 and a minimum roll of 10, then your average damage is going to be 6,670 with Supercharge, 5,005 without Supercharge. So you can see that Supercharge adds a lot of damage. In fact, it's roughly a 35% more multiplier. Hey, that's great, alongside this 40% more multiplier. So yeah, Supercharge in conjunction with skills that deal lightning damage. So Supercharge and Precise Technique is definitely an option. This is best with skills that inherently deal lightning damage, although you can use it with skills that inherently deal physical damage and then convert that physical damage into lightning. You'll just get a smaller boost from it. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, so let's talk about the situation with Resolute Technique, because most builds aren't going to want this, but some of them will. One of the things that happens with Precise Technique is that you probably need, on most builds, to have quite a bit of accuracy rating in order to have your accuracy rating be higher than your maximum life. You probably need to hit approximately 3,000 accuracy rating as a bare minimum to turn Precise Technique on. And once you hit that few thousand, you're pretty much always hitting anyway. However, there is a situation in which that's not the case. And that situation is when you are playing on a build that has very, very, very little life due to either the use of Chaos Inoculation, which sets your life to 1, or Shavronne's Wrappings and presence of Chayula, which is a situation that can allow your character to stay alive, even with a maximum life total that is in the high 3 figures or the low 4 figures. At that point, you may actually not have enough accuracy rating to always hit, and so at that point you may decide to allocate Resolute Technique as well. Resolute Technique has no drawback once you've already invested in Precise Technique and already sacrificed the ability to deal critical strikes, and so at that point Resolute Technique becomes all upside. One thing though that is a real drawback here is that Resolute Technique is on the far left of the passive tree, whereas Precise Technique looks like it will be on the far right edge of the passive tree. The reason I say that, we haven't had any confirmation from GGG, but stylistically it's a character with a bow and it's green. That generally means things that are on the right hand side of the passive tree. So that's one possible use case for Precise Technique, is on Chaos Inoculation builds or just on builds that have a very, very, very low maximum life. One thing you'll need to keep in mind though, if you are playing a build with very, very, very low maximum life, you've got to deal with stuns somehow, you've got to deal with the prospect of freeze somehow. How you do that's up to you. So let's talk next about Hollow Palm Technique. Hollow Palm Technique, I think, is going to be the primary use case where people are going to go ahead and use Precise Technique. I think a lot of people are going to consider it on other builds. People are going to use it alongside Chaos Inoculation for sure, but I do think that Hollow Palm Technique is probably going to be the best use case. So you can get Hollow Palm Technique in at least 2 ways. One is from the Cluster Jewel, one with nothing. The other one is from Replica Perfect Form. I can't personally verify that it can be on Skin of the Lords. I haven't looked into that. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. I'm just going to assume it can't for now. Replica Perfect Form or one with nothing are 2 ways to get this. So Hollow Palm Technique transforms the way you attack enemies. It sort of turns off a number of your item slots. So you count as dual wielding while you are unencumbered. What unencumbered means is that you have nothing in either hand and you are not wearing gloves either. 40% more attack speed with melee skills when you're unencumbered adds a staggering amount of flat physical damage to your melee skills per 10 dexterity while you are unencumbered. So Hollow Palm Technique is going to give you a tremendous amount of unarmed damage. And this works really well because you're going to have a huge amount of dexterity on a build that's running Hollow Palm Technique. If you're not aiming to crit, then you're also going to pick up the benefits of Precise Technique. You're not really going to have to spend anything to get your accuracy rating higher than your maximum life, because all the investment in dexterity that you're making for Hollow Palm Technique has probably already done that. And whilst never dealing critical strikes is a big deal and a big drawback, there's plenty of ways that you can still deal good damage with it. Like, for instance, converting your damage into lightning and using Supercharge is an option. It's not going to work quite as well as it does with a natively lightning skill, but you will still get a considerable chunk of extra damage from Supercharged there as well. So that's a whole bunch of potential options that you've got for building around this keystone. I think it's really good, but it is one of those keystones that the vast majority of builds do not want to touch. And that's normal. Most keystones are like that. You know, Chaos Inoculation, the vast majority of builds are life builds. They don't want Chaos Inoculation. But for the small minority that use it, it is fantastic. And that's where Precise Technique fits in. May Evolves have interesting results. I'll leave it there, and I am looking forward to the live stream tomorrow morning.